After the Feast of the Sun, the Romans decided not to go anywhere for the time being and wait for the envoy of Aetius. Orestes began to study the Hun language with Sabir. Only once, when Orestes went to visit the Onogeses, did Salvian manage to spend the whole evening with Sabir. They drained many goblets of wine, and to the satisfaction of the Roman. Sabir becomes more talkative. I remember with pleasure the years of my service in the imperial guard of the Emperor Honorius. He was funny but not really naughty. Once, Salvian listens patiently to Sabir's narrative and then asks a direct question. Attila and Aetius were to be ambitious young men. They were certainly discussing major projects. Sabir, immersed in his memories, smiles. They spoke much about Roman history, famous emperors and generals, how Attila could turn Hunland into a powerful empire and how Aetius could become a great general. They discussed the actions of Alaric, king of the Goths. Attila was astonished how a people who fled without fighting the Huns from the shores of the Black Sea could take Rome. They said they would never fight against each other. Salvian is recovering. Have they taken an oath? I have not seen. But I was only one of the officers of the guard who accompanied them. Aetius took a solemn oath of fidelity to the Khans Oros and Attila last year during the ceremony of departure of the army to the rescue of the Emperor John. It is a pity that we have been late. It is said that Jean set out his plans before the Senate, which proclaimed him emperor under the ovation of the senators. He wanted the rapprochement between Rome and Hunland, while your Galla Placidia, a fool, prefers the Goths. Salvian frowns and interrupts. What is the ceremony for the departure of the army from the Huns? The white shaman recites the prayer at Tangra for the success of the campaign, explains Sabir. Next, the generals lend, in the name of God, solemn oaths of fidelity to the Khans. The white shamans and other priests with the detachment commanders perform the purification ceremony of the warriors' weapons. Aetius has therefore taken a solemn oath of fidelity to the Khans. Exclaims Salvian. Of course. Confirms Sabir. Otherwise, he could not have had an army of 60,000 horsemen. A few days later, Aetius's messenger arrives and stops in a neighboring house. On the first evening, Orestes invites him to dinner. This messenger is called Mark. He is an officer of Aetius and a freedman of his mother. He was with the young Aetius during his stay with the Huns. He is now about 50 years old. At the beginning of the dinner, Orestes gives food to the spirit of fire and then remarks, "It is interesting that the Huns, who lived so far away from us, nourish the spirit of fire. I learned that they have the same ritual of purifying weapons as our ancestors," Salvian adds. "And they have crosses with 4 equal branches on their flags," exclaims Orestes. Mark begins to tell. "When I arrived here for the first time, more than 20 years ago, this city did not exist. Only the palace of Prince Uldan was seen, surrounded by an enclosure. Now the city embellishes before our eyes." Orestes smiles. Uldan was a faithful ally of the Roman Empire of the West. He saved Italy several times and our friend Sabir participated under his command in the battle against the Goths near Florence. Mark continues his memories with a visible pleasure. Attila, at that time, was already betrothed to Keriko, who was then called Enko. We have often seen him on the back of a horse, their bodies knotted. Everybody admired this couple, young and happy. Attila loves his wife very much and it is only for diplomatic reasons that he must still have some concubines, daughters of influential princes, who live separately, each in his house. It gives them great freedom and even the possibility of divorcing and marrying someone else out of love. The Romans smile. Orestes says, "We have already noticed that. Tell us, what's new in Gaul?" Mark sighs sadly. Aetius has just completed its inspection. The situation is really terrible. The soldiers, who are softened by comfort and spoiled by dangerous prerogatives, no longer want to wear helmets and even leather cuirasses. I am not talking about the coats of mail and heavy steel armor. Everywhere, the officers appropriated a portion of the wages and rations of their soldiers. Salvian objects, but it is the stelature which has long been authorized by the laws. Mark looks at him, drinks wine and says, "The law of 406 interprets the stelature as a right of the tribunes to appropriate up to 7 rations of their soldiers in a year. Our officers have forgotten these restrictions, although the wage of the commander of the legion is 25 times higher than that of the soldiers. Now they are practicing absolutely illegal things. Officers, for example, give their soldiers lasting leave in exchange for their wages and rations during their absence." Salvian looks down. Mark continues his sad story. "We checked lists of soldiers in several detachments. The officers, almost always, have in these lists more soldiers than in reality. For years, they leave among the living their dead soldiers." He still wet his dry throat with wine. "And they continue to receive from the corrupted central apparatus the wages and rations of these dead souls. The empire is in peril. Aetius must even ask for Huns mercenaries to restore some order in the Roman legions. I do not speak of the auxiliary barbarian troops and other dubious allies." Orestes looks attentively at Mark. "And are not the Huns also dubious allies?" Mark answers with assurance, "The Huns are a people with ancient imperial traditions. There is no other barbarian people with such traditions. They fought successfully against China and Persia. They have a strong religion. When they take an oath in the name of God, this oath is inviolable. But it is the friendship between Aetius and Attila that is the surest guarantee of good relations. Perhaps, Aetius will save the empire. What are the objectives of your mission?" Aetius first wants to push the Franks and Rhetes beyond the Rhine, then to take care of the Burgunds without forgetting the Visigoths, the Alans, the Bigaudis. Without Hun mercenaries it's an impossible task. I repeat that the situation is really critical. In addition, the intentions of the Vandals and the Suvers settled in Spain are not known. So you came to recruit Huns mercenaries? I think that our friend Sabir will gladly leave with you. He likes to visit new countries. Aetius asked me to hire first the former officers of Stilicho and the former officers of the Imperial Guard, like Sabir, who speak Latin. I came with the list of the best Hun mercenaries who were with us last year in Italy. We have Attila's agreement and I can start my talks tomorrow." The Romans were not bored. Mark presented him to many of his friends and now Salvian knows much more about the birth of the friendship between Attila and Aetius. The majority of Mark's friends, who have known Attila since his childhood, were the commanders of the military detachments stationed around the capital. They were very hospitable and kind, readily answered all the questions of the Romans, and took an interest in everything from women to military art, from cooking to theological discussions. Salvian noted with great surprise that the Huns did not use big words. Their greatest insults were only comparisons with certain animals. Only the richest drank wine, a rather rare commodity. They all drank a lot of chemise, a sparkling, slightly alcoholic beverage. Orestes and Salvian are impressed by the number of Huns who want to join the Aetius army's units. Every morning Mark receives volunteers, classifies them according to his criteria. The majority of volunteers are young. Some are too young, and Mark places them in his reserve for future recruitments. The dinner at one of Mark's friends ends with the representation of the heroic epic. A storyteller recounts the actions with quick verses and sings the words of the characters. Severe translates the most interesting passages in a low voice. I look towards the west, there I see the Aral Sea, it never ceases to sound its blades. This country, whose borders are unknown, is of incomparable beauty. For Orestes the Aral Sea, the heart of the country of the Huns, is at the other end of the world. He is struck by the feeling of danger, unexpected for him in the epic of the powerful people. The enemies begin to offend the middle world and want to destroy the happy inhabitants and their cattle. But the Huns warriors are ready to defend their country. Those for whom the word "my country" is only a sound, for whom the native steppes are no dearer than the fertile fields of foreign countries, are not true knights of the steppes. For a man, it is shameful to die old in bed of a commonplace illness. A few drops of blood for the country, a little pile of matter for the earth. Is death worthy of a true knight? The adversaries are wild and very stinking. One sees this monster, this savage whose smell rises in smoke. Orestes remembers with a smile the descriptions of stinky barbarians by the Roman writers. He realizes at this moment that the Huns, who spend all their time in the open air, are not stinking and do not like the stink. This comparison amuses him. Thus Orestes sees that, like the barbarians of Roman authors, the sons of these tribes of monsters are very naive, though powerful. The battles of knights are regulated even in the event that the opponent is a monster. They warn of the attack. The vanquished are asked their last vows, and the noble adversaries are pardoned. The ideals of nobility and glory are a priority for heroes. And they also think of their posthumous prestige for future generations, which is very important to them. The fame and prestige are the most important values for all the characters, which is expressed by a formula of triumph that the victors often address to their opponents. I have lowered your glorious name, your white face is soiled. Your glory is diminished. Even monsters prefer to die rather than humiliate themselves before the victors and thus lose their prestige. The epic poem is filled with scenes of pursuit and fantastic feats of noble knights. The narrative ends with the marriage of the principal hero, his wedding, which is at the same time the feast of victory. The divine shaman blesses them. Let the rewards and punishments be distributed, the massacres should and the black destiny should go away. Live in peace to have a fertile livestock, to build cradles for your children. The Romans, delighted with this evening, returns to the room with a lively discussion. Orestes says, "This epic reminds me of Homer's Iliad, except that enemies are fantastic tribes of powerful monsters." Remarked Salvian, "The majority of these monsters remind me of the Cyclops and giant traditions that threaten Ulysses in the Odyssey. The other monsters strangely resemble the Acephalus of Pliny's Natural History, with eyes and mouth on the chest or even sometimes on their back." Mark explains, "The real tribes are hardly ever mentioned among the enemies in epics. In my opinion, this fact can be explained by the respect of the laws of modern Khan, which are destined for the consolidation of all the tribes of the steppes. The heroes are the Huns, the members of the Sun tribe, Kun, or Gun, with the reins on their backs, that is to say, of the Tangra religion. Orestes notes strongly, the heroes of the epic are the defenders of their country, who dream of a happy and peaceful life. We see no aggressiveness. Have you seen the eyes of the boys listening to the epic? This epic teaches them the ideals of chivalrous honor, of courage, of self-control. Mark adds, and also love of the native land and respect for women. But some Romans despise this people, strong and noble. It's very dangerous. Salvian notes, I have noticed that the Huns also despise the Romans. They often look at us with a certain sense of superiority. Mark quietly explains, it is only a feeling of superiority of the horsemen on the pedestrians. With us also the knights form an aristocracy. The Roman riders have always enjoyed a special esteem and privileges. A rider was considered superior to the centurion of the infantry. The Huns do not like to walk even on short distances. A warrior, whose horse is killed, is considered lost. A horseman of the steppes should normally have 3 mounts for his return. The expression a rider with a single horse expresses a great contempt. A knight, who respects himself, must have a superb horse of 7 years. Only the poor ride younger horses. In the same way, the temporary loss of his horse undermines the dignity of man. A man must travel in the saddle. Moving in a carriage is depreciating for him. When horsemen meet, the one who descends from his horse shows by this action the recognition of the superiority of the other, either by his age or some other kind. Pensive, Orestes says, our riders sometimes cling with ropes to their saddles. Nobody knows how to shoot the bow in motion, even the Goths. Then he smiles. That is why we are often transported in a carriage, like women.